is tips, tricks, odds, and ends. So these are just different things that I picked up from many years in you know, like in the industry and things like that. Now, what you are about to hear is like, they're sort of in broad strokes, but in the fitness industry, and I'm sure it's everywhere in life, but there are so many things to consider in the journey, right? And you'll hear so many things, and it's so hard to like keep track of all of these things as well. And then before you know it, you have to like keep track of 10 different things and remember 5 other things and stuff like that. So the purpose of this is just to kind of let you guys know of the different little tips I've picked up along the way that just help me do that and help me keep some of the concepts in mind and allow me to sort of put it into practice in my everyday life. So they're not always 100% accurate, like that they all have their own explanation. So we'll dive straight in and we'll start with training now. So some of them you guys may know, some are a little bit basic, some are a bit more advanced, but I'm just going to take you through them anyway, because even if you pull 1 or 2 useful things out of each slide, absolutely perfect. So I'll start from left to right. Gym bars typically weigh 20 kilos for an Olympic bar. That's an 8-foot one. I've got 20 kilos for an easy bar, but that's actually wrong. They're 10 kilos. And then the Smith machine bar usually weighs about 11. Right, now that's important just because they can vary gym by gym, but like if you're at a standard Snap, Jets, Anytime, World Gym, whatever, they'll all be that size. So you never really have to worry unless you're at like a specialized gym. Now, on the note of that, in the top sort of right corner, count the weight of the bar when lifting the weight you lift. So this is actually a debate that comes up like a lot, especially when I used to be back physically in a gym, of people thinking that they didn't lift. You know, I had one guy, he was trying to lift 100 kilos and he had a 20 kilo either side, the 2 20s either side, and he was disappointed. And then when he realized he count the bar, he'd actually already hit his target. So always count the weight of the bar when you're lifting. As long as you consistently do that, that'll help you progressively overload the total weight you're lifting. Onto something a bit more specific. Try not to, unless you're told otherwise, touch the weight to the stack between reps on like a pin or a plate machine. So the idea is that when you're lifting weights, you want to spend time under tension, right? Time under tension is created when you start the rep, and you want to, where you can, avoid putting it down each rep. Not only does that cut the tension and bring down the total time you spend in that zone, but it can also lead to like form adjustments. Maybe you touch and you slightly adjust, you bend a little bit, and then you can be pushing from a different spot. So once you feel good, get the weight up and try to just keep it moving, never popping it back down onto the stack. Piggybacking off that, I've found that lifting equipment can be helpful. So I've had a few guys recently actually ask me whether they should get like straps or belts or something like this. So this question kind of goes out to you guys. So lifting straps, lifting paraphernalia can be useful, but I found that it's most useful in the circumstance where something is failing and you don't want it to fail. So for example, if you're doing a bent over row and your grip is failing, that is when you would use straps for that exercise. So they're not required and you definitely don't need them, and you can get a good workout without them. But if you find something is failing and you think that is going to stop you, so let's say your grip fails, but maybe your back had 3 or 4 more reps in, that's when you'd use the strap on that lift. So they're not required, but it can be useful at certain times like that. Same goes with a belt. If you feel like you need an extra support on like your top set of squats, that's when you'd put a belt on, but you don't want to over rely on it. You also don't want to completely neglect it if you are feeling these things. Do you know what I mean? If there is a tinge in your back, you're better to play it safe than not. So that's with lifting straps. This one's a little more specific, but it relates to equipment as well. I've actually found that typically you should try to wear shoes with flat soles when lifting weights, right? And then when you're running, you should wear like joggers or runners or whatever. Now, that mostly comes from the shape of the flat sole giving you a solid base to push through. Right, so most running shoes have something that pushes up in like your arch support, which is exactly what you want when you're running. But if you're heavy squatting and you've got basically something forcing its way into the middle of your foot, not only can that be a bit uncomfortable on the foot, it can also lead to a little bit of instability. So it's not super important. Like if you get to the gym and you have runners on, I wouldn't bother going home. Like still do an effective workout, but just by and large, try to keep that in mind if you can. And I found that works particularly well for big compounds like deadlifts and squats and things like that. Also, side note, that's the reason why people take their shoes off as well. You've probably seen. I don't advocate taking shoes off in a gym unless you have like permission from the gym. But yeah, people will deadlift shoeless or something like that for the exact same reason of having a flat base to push from. So that covers the training one, but we'll move on to training 2 because I actually have quite a few of these tips that I kind of get every day. So training 2, So we're going to start with the most important one, I think, actually on this page, and maybe overall, is that when you're doing a rep, in general, try not to lock anything fully out, right? So that means if you're ever doing a bench press, try not to get to the point where you're going to hyperextend your elbows at the top and lock it out. Very, very similar leg press. Sorry, very similar to the leg press, where when you're at the top, try not to let your knees lock out and then sort of bow backwards. Yeah, I'm sure we've all seen those images of people's knees that do messy things on the leg press. Mostly comes from locking out. You can get up quite far, right? But I would always try to aim to keep like a gentle bend in the joint at the end of each rep, especially when working on big things like, yeah, bench and leg press. On the note of lifting big, and even just in general, a good rule of thumb I found for training is breathe out with the effort. So where the exercise is the hardest, that's when you should be inhaling, right? So if you're doing a bench press, you sort of hold your breath on the way down-ish, and then you breathe out as you push it up. I like to imagine that my breath is pushing and moving the weight for me, and that'll always help me remember when to breathe. Breathing is also one of those things that you might have to, if you struggle with it, you might have to start a bit overzealous with it. Like you might be the only guy going in the gym for a while, but eventually it becomes second nature and you don't have to focus on it. It's just about forming those good habits when it comes to it. Because the last thing you want is to get to the end of a bench set and be like, holy crap, I didn't breathe for like 4 reps here. I'm gassed, because that's going to prevent you continuing to do other reps regardless of whether your muscles are ready, because your cardiovascular system is going to be tanked. So that's a good one I found just in general. We've also got for cardio, this is something I found on my bodybuilding prep, is that incline is worth more to calorie burn than the speed on a treadmill. So if you're on a treadmill, right, and you enjoy running, then definitely speed it up. But if you're on the treadmill, say like I get a lot of my guys doing list cardio, like low intensity, I've always found that incline is worth more to